So it's like mid-January right now, and I have no idea how much money I'm going to make this, I was gonna say year, but it could also be a month or a week. Let's look up Americans without a steady paycheck. Interesting, interesting. Half of Americans no longer receive a steady paycheck. It's not just gig economy stuff, it's just the way jobs are structured. For a lot of people, there is no more steady paycheck, and I'm one of those people. One of the things that drives me really crazy about a lot of traditional personal finance advice is that it assumes a steady paycheck, and it assumes that you know what you're gonna make. The idea that you know what you're gonna earn in a given week or month or year is kind of a false assumption for a lot of people. So with that reality, how do you create a financial plan? That is the question I want to talk about today. Before I get into it, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new to the community, hit the subscribe button. That way you get updated on all the latest videos. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is control. So when it comes to income that is unpredictable and inconsistent, it feels like your money is outside of your control. I know because I still deal with this. It is a huge challenge for me to plan my financial life when there is this massive amount of unpredictability. What I do know, though, is what I can control. There are a few things that cost the same amount of money or roughly the same amount of money every single month. Go ahead and make a list of those expenses that you know. Things like your housing payment, your insurance premiums, things like your utility bills. Again, there's a little bit of variation there, but you generally can find an average or get a rough estimate. Any transportation costs, again, gas can vary from month to month, but you want to make your best guess. Now, once you have calculated the total cost of those essential monthly living expenses, what I like to do is add another 10 to 20% to that number. So let's say you have calculated that your essential living expenses are $3,000 a month. If you add another 10% to that, that's going to be $3,300. If you want to give yourself a little more breathing room, consider bumping it up to $3,500 a month. Now, at this point in the game, I really like to focus on necessities as opposed to discretionary expenses. You need somewhere to live. You need some way to get around and get to work. You need to eat. So anything that is gonna help you live and work. That's why I wouldn't cut out internet, for example. You kind of need internet to work by and large. So that would be a necessity expense. Now, once you figure out the total cost of those monthly necessities and add in your buffer, you are gonna get a number. That is going to tell you at a minimum how much money you must have every single month to meet your financial obligations at a minimum. Now, I like to set this minimum even a little bit higher. I know we talked only about necessities and adding in a buffer, but I like to add in two more numbers: a short-term financial goal number and a long-term financial goal number. A short-term financial goal number could include things like debt payoff goals. It could include things like emergency fund savings goals, and it could also include things that are short-term savings goals. So anything that's really coming up in the next year or so. And if you've watched my money goals video, how to set better money goals, you can get a feel for what those numbers should be by calculating the cost of your goals and breaking those goals down on a monthly or weekly basis. I'll link to that video in the description below. Once you have a target for those short-term savings goals, you can add that to your monthly must-have number. I also recommend adding a monthly long-term savings goal. This is really gonna be for funding something like your retirement, a 401k contribution, or if you're self-employed, this might be a Roth IRA contribution or a traditional IRA contribution or a SEP IRA contribution. The idea here is that you bundle together your monthly necessity expenses, add a buffer, and add on a short-term savings goal target and a long-term savings goal target to get a number that you must commit to having in your bank account each and every month to meet your essential needs. And the reason I include the short and long-term savings targets in with the rest of your necessities is because we want those financial goals to become as non-negotiable as any other necessity expense. So you don't have to find yourself choosing between whether to fund your retirement accounts or pay your rent, or whether you should pay your credit card bill or buy groceries. The idea is you get a number that's going to enable you to always do all of those things at a minimum. Now, just because you come up with this number, it doesn't mean you're always going to have the income to at least meet the number, let alone surpass it. But by at least having that benchmark, you have somewhere you can start from. If you find that halfway through the month, you only have one more paycheck coming and you're going to be about $500 short of that essential make or break number, then that's a really good indication to you that you might want to pick up an extra shift somewhere, or pick up some side hustle work, or find a place in your necessities where you might be able to cut back temporarily and make up for it the next month when you anticipate a greater cash flow. The idea here is to create a point of reference over which you have some control, where in the rest of your life you might not have a lot of control, and then use that as the starting point for your financial plan. Once you have that number, you can start to add on. For example, if you earned a lot of money one month, much more than your make or break number, what you can do is subtract that make or break number from that previous month's income and find out exactly how much extra money you have to spend on discretionary items, so things that are not included in that monthly necessity category. You can also put the extra money towards supercharging your financial goals, so maybe making an extra payment towards debt, or putting more money into savings for when you have a leaner month. Or if you just had a lean month where you didn't even hit your make or break number, maybe you still owe yourself your savings contribution from the previous month, right? So you add in that extra money when you have it. But by having that benchmark, that make or break number, you know exactly how much it is you need to satisfy those minimum financial demands. And then you know exactly how much you have over and above to contribute to both your financial goals and to enjoy for your discretionary expenses, whether that's entertainment or travel or anything else. Now, one of the things I like to do when possible is to use my previous month's income as my number for my next month's planning. So right now it's January, for example. And like I said, I actually don't know how much money I'm going to make this month. So what I can do is, again, focus on my knowns. What do I know? Well, I know my monthly make or break number, and I know how much money I made in December. So I can take my income from December and subtract my monthly make or break number for it. And then I can say, okay, well, I have this much money left over to put toward financial goals and or hopefully both spend on fun stuff. So it's all about finding those little pieces of your financial life that you can control, and then you use that to ground yourself even when you're living in an unknown world. Now, if you do know that you don't really have anything lined up for the next few months, well, maybe you get to use that opportunity when things are going well to start really aggressively building that short-term savings buffer so that you do have a little bit more flexibility when things get tighter. Of course, we can always try to anticipate. Things don't always work out as we plan. There are going to be periods where you have to be flexible and you have to make changes. But by planning for a worst case scenario, you'll be better positioned to deal with a better than worst case scenario. Now, if you want to bring more accountability to your spending plan, and this is true whether you have consistent income or not, use an app or a spreadsheet or some kind of tool that's going to help keep you accountable. What happens when we don't track our money is that we can easily spend way more, and then we find ourselves in a position where we're feeling really stretched again, and we're feeling like we don't have the money we need in savings when we need it. So it's not just about being really intentional when you make your financial plan, it's also about being intentional throughout the month and tracking the money you've spent. While I don't have really specific category limits for my spending, I do track every dollar I spend, and I do track how much savings I've set aside so that I can at least check in with myself and be like, oh my goodness, it's the 20th. I made all this extra income this month. I don't know how much money I'm going to make next month, and I want to make sure that I'm setting aside some of that extra buffer room that I have right now into my short-term savings account, because I know that it's going to be tight next month, and I'd much rather have that peace of mind of having the extra savings now than I would of having the extra indulgence now. This is not to say I don't spend and splurge. I do very much, but I'm always tracking my money so that I at least have a sense of how well I'm doing, and I do have a sense of what the landscape looks like ahead of me so that I know when I need to really stockpile and maintain my cash reserves, as opposed to when I do have a little bit more room to be flexible and to spend on discretionary expenses. This is so important when you don't have a consistent income because you're planning with unknowns. And so the only points you have to ground you are the knowns. And if you're not tracking your money, and if you're not knowing what your make or break number is, and if you're not seeing your income and knowing what that is one month versus another month and how that compares to your make or break number, then you really don't have any knowns and you really are just guessing and you really won't be able to financial plan. So finding those variables that are knowns and then using those knowns to then create some structure in your financial life is going to be what's going to make it possible for you to get a little bit more financial clarity and to be able to plan a little bit better. Budgeting, financial planning, spending planning, it's tough even when you know what you're gonna make. When you don't know what you're gonna make or when you don't know when you're gonna make it, it's much more difficult. So be kind to yourself. It's okay if your plan does not work out as you hoped it would for the first few months. It's okay if it doesn't work out for the first year, but by being mindful and by trying different strategies, inevitably you're going to find something that works for you. It is still a challenge for me to plan with my inconsistent income. There are still moments where I wind up in a pinch. There are moments when that check doesn't arrive and I really needed it and I didn't give myself enough of a buffer to anticipate more lateness or to anticipate a worst case scenario. And from there, I just adjust and I make do. And there have been times where I have had to rely on my savings, and there's been times where I had to rely on my credit card, and I felt a lot of shame about that. But I think it's important that everybody knows that it happens and that it probably will happen to you. And it doesn't mean that you're not capable of managing your money. And it doesn't mean that you can't financial plan just because you have an inconsistent income. It just means that there are only so many things we can control. The key here is to focus on those elements when you know them. And then from there to start planning what your next steps are based on those knowns. I hope that with these strategies, you've found a few ways to manage your money a little bit better, even if you have an inconsistent income, because if you don't have this foundational building block in place first, it's really, really hard to make progress toward any financial goal. So this is really a critical starting point, and I hope you feel that you at least have a few ways of thinking maybe differently about the elements in your financial life that you can control that can help serve as your starting point for creating a financial plan no matter what is going on with your income. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone if you think it will be helpful for them, and subscribe to the channel because we got more money tips coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.